So welcome. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. So I'll start off with sort of a general question, and we'll go down the panel. First is, how do you see the future of insurance distribution evolving, and how will that be different by the major segments that you're familiar with?
Well, I just want to thank everybody for being here tonight and having me on the panel. It's eye-opening to see your presentation and all these companies that are in our space, and if anybody's looking for an agent or an employee in the next couple of years, so I'm going to be handing out my card because it appears I might not have a place in a few more years. But I think this disruption has been happening for years. It happened in the personal line space. It happened in auto. We know the disruption that happened there, and it's moving farther and farther down the line. And established people in this industry, I think, would say that they're insulated. And people that have been in this business a long time always thought commercial was safe, and they always thought that specialty lines were very, very safe. And I think we're seeing every day that that's changing. And where I sit, I think being able to create value and be ahead of the technology curve, and more importantly, the value add that you bring. It's not just an insurance policy that I sell. It's my network, it's my resource, it's the training I bring, it's the data and analysis I bring. So we are better as agents than we were a year ago and 5 years ago and 10 years ago because of the competition that exists out there, and we're going to continue to have to keep being better and move forward in order to exist going forward.
Yeah, I'd second that. I think the things that are working well today and the brokerages that are doing well today, I think they'll continue to exist, while newcomers like Lemonade or Swift on the independent agent distribution side are going to help redefine expectations both for brokers and for the end consumers and make for a better customer experience in the process. And newcomers will come, startups are going to come and help out at all steps of the value chain.
I think agents and carriers are going to get more sophisticated with the technology that is out there and start to incorporate it into their processes. I think there's going to be an attitude of predict and prevent versus pay a loss after it happens, and so we're going to focus more on risk management and how we can prevent those losses. And we're going to use technology to do it. And the agent is going to be the conduit of that information and education. I also think consumers are going to be more educated in the future. With all this excitement and, well, maybe excitement on our end for InsurTech, but there's a lot of money being poured into marketing in the insurance business, and I think that's helping to educate the consumer.
I feel blessed that I've come from a market, the UK, that is literally 5 years ahead of the US in the small business space. So in the UK, if you're a small business looking for insurance, you don't go to an agent generally, you go to the web. What I'd say on that though is that there's a lot of people out there saying agents are going the way of the dodo. That's just not true. What you see are agents just be different in terms of them embracing technology and using technology. You can see that today when you look at things like Bold Penguin, Appulate, Zagent, all these brands that are springing up. They're not going direct to customer, they're supporting the agent channel because that's where the business is today, and it'll be there forever. So
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think our research, if you look at what happened in personal lines as the early indicator, personal lines, despite the billions of dollars in regular advertising that Geico and Progressive have done over the last 10 years, they haven't taken the whole market, right? Personal lines agents are still out there. They're still the majority of the market. The majority of personal lines is still sold through agents, but it's not 100% anymore. And I think that one of the opportunities for carriers as they think about this is, it's not a matter of change or die. It's a matter of change or put fetters on your ability to grow.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment on that. I do own an InsurTech company that does support the agency channel, but I also am an agent at Erickson Insurance. And 10 years ago, we decided to specialize, and we specialized in high net worth property and casualty insurance, and we did that because we saw the margins thinning out on the mass market personal line side, and they were broadening on the high net worth property casualty side. So I think that more agencies are going to continue to specialize, they're in different niches, and that's where they're going to start to focus.
And I think, we see that across the economy, is that there is always room for a value-add, non-price sensitive segment. You can see it in malls, that high-end malls and low-end malls are doing very well, and mid-market malls are being hollowed out. You can see it in retail where, Whole Foods and Nordstrom are doing very well, and Walmart is doing very well, and Macy's and JCPenney are kind of struggling.
Yep.
So, we talked a little bit about, how we see the roles of agents and brokers evolving. What do you think is, the most important thing for InsurTechs and startups to know about engaging with the agent and broker channel?
I think the point that we're not going away is great to hear, obviously, but also important for technology that we have roots in our communities and a lot of infrastructure. We already have a lot of the clients. We have a lot of the lines. We've addressed a lot of challenges that they've had. We've grown with the business. So I think empowering the agent with some of these tools, I think it's great to go direct, and I think it's important in a lot of different areas, but especially from the commercial side and where we are rooted and have the infrastructure to empower the agents to be more successful. So I think it's obviously taking care of your client and empowering your client and seeing through that the client is best served, but giving the agent those tools to continue to do what they do best, I think is very important as well.
So what's the most important thing for the insurers to know about InsurTech in relation to distribution? I think for me, I work routinely with students in the Boston ecosystem of universities. Most recently, I worked with a team of 7 students at Northeastern on their design development team, and I was explaining to them the insurance industry. And one of the things I explained was our agency of 20 agents spends about $45,000 a year on a software that doesn't work on an iPhone or an iPad or a Macintosh. In fact, it doesn't work on Microsoft Edge. It only works in Internet Explorer. And I know, Matthew was just explaining how it's just been 10 years that smartphones have been out, but to put things in perspective, I mean, these students were like 8 to 10 years old when iPhones came out, and their entire life is centered around this one thing. And so the idea that any software that we have, or any distribution that we have, or any experience that we have that's not centered in that one thing, to me is absolutely crazy. And these students literally jaws dropping to the floor thinking about like the opportunity that's there. So I think understanding that the next generation of decision makers, they're graduating right now, they've had this technology for 10 years, it's not even a question of does something work on my phone. It's just that's what life is for them.
So I think the InsurTechs, one of the things I see them do very well is distribution and marketing. And one of the things I see them maybe struggle sometimes with is the claims. And when there's a claim, is it covered? And how is it covered? And how quickly is it paid? I think a lot of time is spent on the front end, but more time needs to be spent on the claim and the contract to make sure that they understand their consumer, what their consumer is buying, so that when there is a claim, the consumer gets what they expect.
Yeah, I think the piece of advice I'd have is that when you think about the industry, and I hate to say it because I've worked in insurance all my life, is that it's a really low bar. I'm so thankful we're not up against Amazon and Zappos and Uber.
Not yet.
Yeah. So my encouragement would be, don't get too focused on the really disruptive ideas. There's a ton of value in just incremental innovation. Things that are just the norm to other industry sectors who are brilliant at this stuff, that if we could just do some of that in our industry, there's a ton of value. And I think related to that is, when I think about small business, those 340,000 policyholders we've got, that's a $700 premium. Nobody makes money on that in the old value chain. When you've got 3, 4, 5 parties touching it, you've got an underwriter checking the paper app, nobody makes money there. So help agents make money. find ways to make it slick and efficient, and so we're not touching that business to make the economics stack up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is it's a target-rich environment in many ways, and you say we're not competing against Google and Amazon yet, but there's no reason that for example, Amazon has a tremendous foothold in small business financial services with their lending program. They're about 2 seconds away from dominating payments. They just have to care in order to do it. They already have a tremendous amount in terms of the supply side with the Amazon business, as well as being a platform for small businesses. So it's a very small leap for them to get into required insurance if they wanted to do it. My guess is they do it as a program manager rather than holding the risk. So they're going to be a tremendous partnership opportunity for somebody,
And I would just add, even if they're not competing with us, it's still, everyone today expects if you want a product, you can have it in 2 days, and you just click it in one button and it's done. And so while they're not necessarily competing with us, they're changing consumer expectations.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we haven't talked about, but is playing a role in the distribution market, is the online aggregators and comparative quoters. What do you see as their role, and what do you see as their likely role in the near future?
So I visited a team at Google about a year ago in Boston that sells ads to the insurance industry. And these are some really smart storytellers that could help use the data to craft stories and sell ads to, say, Allstate or State Farm. And I was really scared because they emailed me a few days before, and they're like, there are going to be 16 people in the room there, and I was just freaking out. So I emailed some of the smartest people that I knew to ask for their input to some questions. And a friend of mine came back, and one of the things he mentioned was that, I shared this with the team there, and I said, look, this may be inflammatory, but the state of, he has a quote he gave me here, that the state of online aggregators and shopping is obscene. Much of it is funneling people unwittingly into submitting information into robo-dialing hell, and it's just a disaster, and the loss ratios are awful. And so I was sharing this with a team at Google who sells this product basically, and the leader of the meeting was just like, stop. He's like, I want everybody in the room to read that like multiple times, because at least from our experience on the agent side is that the quality of these leads that are going online and putting their information in is very low, and there's a lot of losses around it, and the customer experience for the customer is horrible because their data is just getting out there and they're getting spammed with a tremendous amount of stuff that's not helpful.
Hello? Oh, good. Have we got anyone from Travellers in the room? I suspect we have. Schnitzer is a smart guy buying Simply Business. Because I think you're talking about the agent experience there, which I think is very different to, again, referencing the UK, where online aggregators are almost the norm for consumers. I think he sees a future. He bought Simply Business that had zero business in the US for a reason, and that's because I think there's a huge opportunity there for people that embrace online aggregators here, because it's just in its very embryonic stage. When we saw that transaction, I just thought to myself, that's the start of online aggregation in the US, and it's only going to grow. So I think it's good for consumers because you're giving them choice, and I think for those that embrace it here, it is a good opportunity.
And there is an example of that here called TrustedChoice.com. And Trusted Choice is an initiative that started by the Big I probably about 2 or 3 years ago. And they generate hundreds of thousands of leads every month, and they distribute them down to their agents who subscribe to their model. And they've been very successful, and they're working out some kinks. And one of the kinks, it's kind of funny, they record all the calls for these leads that go to agencies. And the biggest challenge they had was not getting the lead to the agent, but the agent picking up the phone, and the agent being thankful for that lead and treating that lead like it should be treated. And so one of the challenges the aggregators are going to have on our end is the agent attitude towards online leads, which, you know, I think we're making headway in changing, but it's going to be a long road.
Yeah.
I completely agree. What I'd say on that, though, is that, you know, that's an industry focus. You know, one of the challenges we've got as an industry is that, you know, we've got a supply side problem. You know, when we came to the US in 2009 with our online business, I was stunned by the fact there are 160,000, at the time, 160,000 searches a month on Google for business related terms. And 10 years ago, what happens? You know, you're a consumer, you search, you get the result, and it says phone this number or fill out this form, which all of us know takes days and days and days to come back. So I think Trusted Choice is a great brand. I'd encourage them to flip it on its head and say, actually, what the consumers want when they go there. They want instant gratification. They don't want to put their stuff in and then wait for someone to call back. I think that's the challenge, just focusing on the customer rather than focusing on our industry in the way that we tended to work in the past. But I do agree with you.
Two things. I look at it as if you went to a trade show or a networking event, right? You talk to 20 people. It's just like getting 20 leads from an aggregator. You have to be able to sift through those and use your time wisely. There may be somebody you don't have a market for, someone who's not interested, someone who has claim history. There's some people you can't help. And I've always struggled that when I was new in the industry, there was a lot of kickback from established brick and mortar agencies that said, people that are going online looking for insurance aren't the kind of customer we want. Well, everybody uses a computer. Everybody goes online. You have to vet them just like you vet somebody walking near your door, right? You can't help anybody. A big innovation that I think is very useful that we use at our agency is the live transfer. So somebody will go on, whether they call or they click, and you use an intermediary and they live transfer that lead to you. And that way, in real time, you can get them on the phone, and it's just like if they called you right from your website. You have that warm lead, and you have a way better chance of converting that. You're not competing. The value that I think agents have is that we have multiple markets, so there isn't a need to have 5 different intermediaries working on an opportunity. So that I think is very valuable to the consumer. It cuts out some of that calling and aggression that I think some people feel, and they get the value of using an agent, and it is in real time and not waiting 2 or 3 days to get a call back.
Yeah, I think the lead distribution model is an interesting, form of online advertising, but it's not really InsurTech. There are a number of plays in that space. There's, a number that have taken down a lot of funding for it. But they haven't read the 10Ks from InsWeb from the late 90s. It's a challenging end of the business, and it's not really very innovative. It was done 20 years ago. I think it's important to draw a distinction between the demand aggregators and the digital agencies that are actually able to sell directly. Right, so the Simply Business is an actual agency that is that's able to fulfill the need, correct?
Yeah, there's a number of those. Simply Business, CoverHound, CoverWallet, Insurion, and I think the interesting thing there is I don't think we'll see any more, because every VC I talk to says there's enough in the space now. It's a question of not investing in new ones, but picking the winners out of that half a dozen that are in the space, trying to make it work.
Right, especially the ones that are taking a sort of a general approach of being the insurance agency, being the online insurance purchase point for anyone, whereas opposed to, somebody like Next or Bunker is focusing specifically on a discrete pool of customers in a specific niche and using that partnership to address that customer acquisition cost. I want to be conscious of the clock, so I'm going to jump to the end, and then we'll go back one. So one of the questions that we talked about in advance were emerging risks and how those are affecting distribution. So you have new types of risk like Uber and Airbnb, where you have individuals taking on commercial risk and then not taking on commercial risk. So there's short term. There's new consumer technology like drones that are not covered by traditional risk management. What do you see from your vantage point?
So there's so much happening in the space right now, and some very smart people are finding these loopholes in the system and creating companies out of it, like Slice. Slice identified that the homeowner's policy doesn't cover short-term rentals very well, although the marketplace expected it to. So they developed a liability and a property policy that just covers a day or a night, you know, for a homeowner when they want to rent out their home on Airbnb. And they've built a great company out of it. They've partnered with companies in London, and they're from Canada, and they're doing business in the US. And so there's a lot of these that are coming out, but it's fragmented in the industry. And so consumers who had a homeowner's, an auto, a valuable articles, an umbrella policy are now buying a Slice policy. They're buying a phase 2 Uber policy, you know, to cover their kid who's driving for Uber at college. And so they have all these different policies out there, or maybe they don't because they don't know that they're not covered for it. So I think the challenge is the carriers are having a difficult time developing the products in their own suite of services and adding them as endorsements or whatever to their suite. And it's creating confusion in the marketplace. You know, as an agent, I'm trying to help my customer. How do you get coverage for this Airbnb? Well, we got to put you in excess surplus lines. That's not a great solution. It's not a good customer experience. It's not great coverage. But then there's this Slice company, but they make it really easy and it's cheap. Let's just do that. So it's making it fragmented. It's making it confusing. And I think we're going to come full circle where the carriers are ultimately going to come out with products for us to use and for the consumers that make sense. But in the meantime, there's a lot of startups that can take advantage of that.
So I think insurance by nature is a little conservative. It has to be stable, which is important for consumers. And I'll just say, if I think back to a few years when Uber was kind of taking off, and Airbnb, I would go to agency education events, and it always astonished me, you know, there or at best practices events or anything, the whole focus was on basically trying to tell the customers how stupid Uber was because, you know, you didn't have insurance protection, or how dumb Airbnb was because you're putting yourself at risk. And I just thought to myself, like, you know, to Kevin's point, like, we need to put the customer first. Like, what does the customer want? If they want to get insurance for ride sharing, why don't we innovate by building a new product that automatically includes that in there? Like, we would always have our marketing representatives from the insurance companies come to our office and knock on our door and tell us how they're better and they have all these great things and we should put more business their way. And I always thought, like, wouldn't it be great if you could innovate with a product that our customers want, like build cyber liability into our BOPs, build build Uber coverage into the auto policy, build Airbnb coverage into the home policy. Like that's an innovation that I would like as an agent, just to make my life easy. And I understand it's a challenge because it's an emerging risk and you have to, you know, figure it out actuarially. And I think to Kurt's points, you know, those problems are being solved, and I think eventually these coverages will be built in automatically, and we're seeing that already.
I know, like, Lexington offers an endorsement for, I don't know if it's specifically to Airbnb, but they have an option that if it's a short-term rental, you can purchase it. I always thought that some of the big auto insurance companies would make it an endorsement for Uber driving and have that capability, but I think it's really important for the consumer and for the insurance marketplace as a whole to address these issues and not have to go to several vendors and again make it so onerous and confusing. And I think that point of some people don't know. So, you know, I have a great insurance company. I've spent a lot of time in doing this and working with my broker, or I've gone direct, and I don't even realize I have this gap because my son came home from college and doing Uber, or I'm away or I have a secondary home and I'm using it for Airbnb. So that's, I think, the more problematic, that even people doing the right thing have this shortfall because the industry hasn't moved forward to accommodate something that millions and millions of people are doing, and it's very common and on everyone's books. So.
Yeah. And I think that's where, you know, the innovation that's coming from the InsurTech community is powerful. You know, all of these things start up as individual companies focusing on a specific point solution. Long term, these will be rolled in. Long term, these will be part of the product portfolio. But, you know, as we've said, the industry itself is primarily conservative. It's very risk averse. They're going to wait and see and buy their innovation from outside more often than build it internally. And I think that's the opportunity for InsurTech entrepreneurs, both in terms of product innovation and in terms of distribution, is to point the way. You know, we have our copy of our newsletter out there. You know, we don't see any InsurTechs that are in the market right now disrupting the industry in the sense of, is Lemonade going to be bigger than State Farm in the next 10 years? The answer is no. The Lemonade is going to be purchased by somebody within the next X period of time who's looking to capitalize on the investment that they've made in customer experience and customer targeting and use of AI. And I think that's really where the opportunity is. We have the light. We're going to have a brief announcement and a break, and then the second panel. Thank you very much for your time and for coming today. Thank you all. And again, if anybody wants...
Great job. Well done. Great job.
If anybody wants a copy of the slides from the previous presentation, just come give me your card or send me an email. It's mj@novarica, the name is all over the place, .com. Thanks.